I want you to take advantage of every second of your storytelling.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Seattle Angel workshop series. Also, this is being shared with the Startup Investor Accelerator programs that we have spread across Europe. So we have a wide range of people here today. We run workshops both Seattle time and Central European time regularly each week. And part of that, we put our recordings on the YouTube channel for Seattle Angel Conference. Today, we're working with Dana Robinson on the question of storytelling in our pitches, one of the fundamental things that make pitches more interesting. Dana, I'm going to highlight you. Take it away.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. John said that there's several people here from Europe, and I also spotted some people here from around different places in the US. So put in the chat where you're calling in from, because that's one of the marvelous things about Zoom. It's just fun to see where people are calling in from. And say, greetings from wherever you are, Seattle or wherever. I love this topic of storytelling because it can make such a huge impact in how people communicate. And this is why. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I see storytelling as an integral part of communication skills. And I've been obsessed with communication skills most of my career. So a little bit of context. When I listen to pitches, I wear two hats. I'm an angel investor, and I'm a trainer of presentation skills by background. So as an investor, I'm a member and on the board of E8 Angels. We invest in clean tech, but I attend events by lots of other groups, including Seattle Angel Conference and several others. I was at a pitch event last night even. So I see hundreds of pitches and I see what works and what doesn't. And I've learned what investors want from that investor perspective. And then as a trainer of presentation skills, I've worked in Asia, in Europe, and in the US. I've trained people from different cultures, lots of different industries. So when I'm wearing these different hats, I notice how people are communicating and what's going on when something really works. And I understand, I'm really listening for when it doesn't. And I notice, like, why did that not work? Why did people stop listening? So that's why I started pitch training, because I want to help founders have more effective pitches so that they can deliver them with impact and communicate better. So, I'm happy you're here. Let's connect on LinkedIn. I put my personal link in the chat. My business one is on the screen. And I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to start with some myth busting on storytelling. So the biggest myth that I hear people happening, that I hear founders complain of, I hear people saying, investors only care about numbers. They don't care about people. They don't care about saving people. They don't care about what great things I'm doing. But actually, that's a myth, because I'm on that other side where I hear investors talk about who they like and why. And they talk about people. In fact, I follow several VCs on Twitter or X, and one of them said, so I rejected a founder because even though everything else was a fit, I just don't like him. Did I do the right thing? And there was an overwhelming response, and everybody said, absolutely. If you're going to work with somebody for 10 years, you have to like them. Or you have to develop trust. If you don't like them, there's no trust. So it's important. Even investors want to make sure that there's a fit in that they know you and like you and trust you. And I've seen storytelling work in pitches. In fact, I'm going to tell a story of last year. John will know this one. At Seattle Angel Conference last year, there were some great companies in the final session, and that lots of people were there and people were voting and judging, and then the investors in that group went off to choose. And I thought, well, there's a couple here with great numbers. They have good traction. They have a really good business model. I think that like that one in particular with some good momentum is going to win this. But you know who they picked? They picked the company with the best story. The story was so compelling about how deep this problem is that they're solving. And their story around their vision was so compelling that people wanted to help. I mean, and the story really was great. It was this vision of improving health outcomes in rural communities. Who doesn't want that? But I kept thinking, oh, they're not going to win. It's a great story, but they don't have the best numbers. But they're the one that won. So storytelling is more than just an art. It's more than just a fun thing for kids. Stories build trust and get people engaged. So it's a vital communication tool that you can use to bring in investors and customers. I don't know if any of you have seen the film Show Her the Money. Click like in your thing, because I don't know, maybe not everybody's seen it yet. It hasn't gotten everywhere in the world, but it's hit a lot of US cities. So I saw Show Her the Money last Friday. And if you have a chance to see it, it's an amazing film, highly recommended. And it's all about storytelling. It's stories of founders, it's stories of investors. It shows the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it evokes so many feelings, feelings of empathy, feelings of cheering them on. I mean, people were crying at the sad bits and crying at the joyful bits. It was really well done. And when I was there, so I'll tell you about a story of my experience. I was there and I met lots of people that I know. I went alone, so I was grateful. I ran into lots of people that I know. And I thought, I took lots of pictures. I'm going to follow up on the weekend because I'm going to post the pictures on LinkedIn and send emails to people I met that I want to make sure I follow up before I get busy with my work week. But you know what? My weekend plans did not happen. My dad's in the hospital and I was really worried about him. So that's pretty much all I thought about. He has pneumonia, and I kept thinking, should I postpone everything I have going on this week, including this event, and push it back so I can fly there and be with my dad? But the good news is that yesterday he turned around, he's getting better. And I have other family there, so he's being looked after and he's getting good care. So I was like, okay, I feel better. I'm going to fly on Friday. So once I made that plan and know that he's getting better, I could then focus. I want to help you think about what's going on in a story. As you're listening to my story, there's feelings that come up. So perhaps empathy, probably empathy. If you've ever been with a loved one in a hospital, or if you have aging parents with health issues, you're going to feel empathy with me because that's a tough thing when we worry about someone in the hospital who's sick. And empathy, when you use it in story, helps you to feel like you know someone. It builds trust. Other feelings can come up in stories, such as excitement. I saw pitches in the last week where people were so good at telling the story of their vision that it created a lot of excitement in the room. You're really excited for them. And that makes you, it helps you to connect to that person, helps you to trust them. You want to be on their team. You want to help them. So these are the kinds of feelings and connections that good stories evoke in people, at their cellular level. Hormones are changing in our body when we feel empathy and trust and excitement. And do you know what? Investors know this. I've talked to several investors. I've heard them speak on panels where they or when I'm having a chat over coffee and asking them about skills they look for. And investors have told me that they look for founders with good storytelling skills because you need those skills to communicate with investors and with customers. And even when you're building your team and recruiting the best people, storytelling skills can bring people on board. So how we communicate impacts what people remember. It impacts their impression of us. It impacts how much influence we have. And even if we're taken seriously. So using storytelling can really help us to connect with our listeners. And it's something we've been using forever, right? Humans have been telling stories for over 100,000 years. Humans have been writing for, I don't know, 3,500 years. So long before we could write, we were telling stories. And how long were we been using PowerPoint? Maybe 20 years? I didn't look it up, but it's not that, in the greater scheme of things, it's not very long. So stories can be really effective where sometimes writing and PowerPoint just can't capture it. Now, I have some good news for you. The good news is that everyone can improve their storytelling skills, and you can learn more. So it's a skill. So please approach this with this mindset of we're learning a new skill. I'm going to try something new. Be open to something different. Because you have an amazing story. So give yourself this time to improve. Put away your phone, get out some paper, take some notes. Because today I'm going to cover ways that you can use stories to make your pitch more memorable and engaging. So let's start with some whys. Like, why should you try stories? And what are those benefits? Well, stories can make your pitch more memorable because you're creating this connection. People feel drawn into it and they're now engaged. Then they're more likely to remember. Another one that's really helpful is that stories can help complex ideas become more simplified. Okay, so if something's way too complicated, a story can paint that picture in a much more simple way that we can get it right away. Stories can also make numbers meaningful, right? I said it's a myth that investors only look at the numbers. Well, those numbers are helpful, but there's a meaning and a story behind them. And if you can bring that out in a way that's more meaningful, then we'll remember it. And stories can really bring out your vision. They can make your vision personal and exciting and bring people in that want to help. Because, keep in mind, investors are people too, right? If we see a really dense, complicated pitch that's heavy on data, we get confused or we get overwhelmed with information and we stop listening. That's just the way it is. Humans don't listen in and learn with dense PowerPoint slides. We have learned for centuries to connect with stories. And investors have emotions too. As much as we are trained and taught, these are the numbers to look for, this is how to look for traction, these are the questions to ask, investors still have emotions. And even if they're not a right fit, they might help in a different way with connections or advice. So investors still connect to stories. So I'll give you some areas where I'm a member of VH Angels, and these are all mission-driven investors. They're impact investors. So they don't just make investment decisions based on numbers, but they 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 want to see that that their investment's going to have an impact. But they're also like, we are expecting a return. So it's not just a charity donation when we invest in a company. But I hear the responses from investors, like even in the Q&A, the pitch will finish and somebody will ask a question, say, hey, I love what you're doing. So tell me more about whatever. So you've already got them on board. So that vision in a story gets people on board, even if they're not a fit to invest. One company that I invested in is called Pit Moss. And they created this vision of first the dire one. Peat was being depleted all over North America. And as that's coming out of the ground to create, peat moss that we use in gardening, that's releasing carbon in the air. And that story of how that industry works now is really grim. But then their vision is creating a compost that's not made from peat, that is going to protect our environment and still be even more effective and reduce water usage and have healthier plants and a healthier environment. It was such a beautiful vision of what they're creating that people want to get on board and help. And I've seen other wonderful visions, like reducing PFAS in the environment so that people are healthier. And so all of these, oops, are you sharing your screen, John? No, I'm looking at something else, sorry. So all of these visions of whether this is what's going on that needs to be fixed, or this is what's my vision for the future, can really make it memorable. Because numbers are not easy to remember, but a story is. So my goal when you're giving a pitch, or when you're talking to whether it's investors or customers or future team members, that you make it easy to understand and remember. So, and the reason I emphasize being remembered is that I've seen cases where investors are meeting a few days after a pitch, after we see a whole bunch of pitches, right? Investors don't just see one, they might see, several in one day. And then I hear them go, oh, remind me what they do, or who's that company, or I don't remember what they covered in their pitch. So my goal for you is that days after your pitch, investors remember what you do and why they like you. So we really want you to be remembered. Okay, so will you be remembered days later? Here are some areas that, okay, and here's why it's important to be remembered for later. I'm just going to emphasize that a little bit more, is that investors don't make that decision right away. They're not going to see your pitch and go, I'm in, here's my check. This is where Shark Tank gets it. That is way not realistic. I have never seen somebody decide after one pitch that they're in, that they're going to write a check. So you really need to make sure that they remember you, so that when the people that are listening to your pitch are several days later, they're talking to their investment partner or their boss or their spouse or whoever they invest with. And somebody says, who have you seen that's interesting? Are they going to remember what you do and why they like you? Because that will increase your chances of getting a second meeting. That is your goal at every pitch, is to get to the next meeting. So you don't have to try to cram everything in your pitch. So here's some things that, these are the two mistakes that I see most common. And we're going to talk about how you can use storytelling to avoid those mistakes. Okay, the first mistake that I see all the time, and other investors in the room here are going to go, oh, yes. The first mistake is to TMI, too much information. If a pitch is really dense with a lot of information, it's impossible to remember everything. And in fact, it decreases how much we remember. Pitch with lots of information, I probably remember nothing the next day. But a pitch with a couple really clear messages and a good story, I'll remember at least the most important bits. And the second biggest mistake I see is that the content in the pitch is not investor focused. So it doesn't cover what investors are most interested in. So therefore, what we want in a pitch, this is what you want, write this down. You want to be concise and you want your content to be investor focused. Here's what I mean by investor focused. An investor focused pitch covers what investors want to know. It keeps them engaged and paying attention, and they're going to be asking relevant questions. So how can you focus your pitch with a clear message for investors? And to do that, let's get in the head of investors a little bit. And to get in the head of investors, I want you to be in the mindset of investor focus. What I mean by in the mindset of investor focus is you really are just thinking about what is it that they want to hear. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And this is actually hard because founders know too much, right? You are deep in product development. You are deep in working with customers. You are deep in planning your operations. So when you're really focused on running your business, it's hard to kind of get out of you. We want to talk, it's human nature. We talk about what we know, right? We talk about what we're working on. And if we're working on product development, we love to talk about product development. So to really get ourselves in the head of what investors want, let's do a mindset of investor focus by thinking of your pitch as a gift. You're gifting investors this opportunity, but not in an arrogant way. Think of your gift like if a loved one has a special birthday coming up and you want to get them a great gift. You're going to think of what's meaningful to them. What's important to them? What do they like? You're not going to go buy a gift of something that you love, right? So you're going to think about what they love. And then you're going to deliver that gift with care so that they receive it. So that's what you're going to do with your investor pitch. You're going to create content that's meaningful to investors and then deliver it in a way that's engaging so that they really get it. And this is where storytelling comes in. So we're going to make it easy for investors to understand what you do and why you do it. And we want to make it easy for investors to understand why they should be interested in what you're doing. So here's some things, on what the content of the pitch and where you can use story. So the first rule of presentation skills training is to know your audience. So this is where being audience focused really helps. And I want you to understand the investor perspective. And to understand this, we want all of your pitch to be about them. Your pitch is focused only on what investors want. You can save those product features and those great product development plans for a follow-up meeting. But right now we need to draw them in and get them curious. So these are some areas that investors always want to understand in a pitch, even an elevator pitch. If you can convey to investors that you are solving a really hard problem, that's number one, problem, and that you have a unique solution. Solution is two. Three is market. Investors want to see that it's a large and growing market. And investors want to see that you have a dedicated and talented team. And investors also really want to understand that you have market validation and traction. And all of those things can be made clear through stories. So you might not need stories for all of them, but focus on the area that seems to cause the most confusion with investors. That's where you can really use a story to add clarity. So I'll give you some examples. For problem, conveying problem and solution through a customer journey of they're going from this pain point to this desired outcome is very powerful. Team, showing your team story in a way that shows how you are personally motivated and committed, and here's why, that is very powerful and memorable because investors want to see commitment. Market. In market opportunity, it's way more than a TAM, SAM, SOM, right? Those are boring numbers. We want to understand what's going on in the market that makes this the best time to invest in that market. And that can be conveyed through a story. And your traction. If you have a story that shows demand for this product or numbers, and here's what those numbers mean, and here's why this product is gaining traction, then that can be powerful. So I'm going to give you some examples where these sections of the pitch, we use stories to make the parts of the pitch that were difficult to convey came out in a much more engaging way. So first of all, the problem. Problem statements are a big problem on most pitches. They are often unclear or vague or kind of complicated, particularly for companies who solve lots of problems. So I always ask my clients, what's the pain point of your customers? And we really dig in on the client, their customer journey. So if you can think of like, okay, I have these customers or I have this ideal customer in mind, what's their pain point? What are they struggling with? How can I convey this in a story? So here's an example where I saw a pitch at a practice session a couple of years ago, where they came in and said, the problem is climate change. But then when they talked about their solution did not solve climate change. So climate change is not the problem you're solving, even if you're trying to help the climate. We dug into what is actually the problem you're solving and who's your customer, and tell me about them. So then at the next practice session, it was very clear. It was something like, this is Maria, a farmer in Eastern Washington, and she loses 25% of her crop from farm to customer, which is a huge loss of revenue. And our solution reduces crop wastage by 50%. Wow. And then we can save the climate change story for the market opportunity. Because of extreme weather events, they're losing more and more of their crop, drought or whatever. So, but we really could focus in on the problem. So the story of the customer made that problem and solution crystal clear without even talking about product. and without having to talk about climate change until we got to the trends in the market that are making this urgent. In fact, just last week, I worked with a client, and that first slide was the problem is climate change. So I made him move it. And so we talked about, the customer and he has a very, very complex problem and a very, very complex solution and a very, very complex product. So we needed to simplify it because this was an area that investors were always confused by when they were asking him about the pitch and follow-up. So we reworked it to meet Eric, the engineer. He's using tools for his job that are inefficient and time-consuming because in his industry, customer behavior has changed and climate change is making his job harder to plan. And the solution is one that helps make him plan. It uses big data to forecast weather events and customer needs. So I'm telling you that without telling you about the product, but it made that crystal clear so that investors, even if they're not an engineer, can understand exactly. Of course, he went into more detail because he's talking to investors for his industry, but the part of the pitch that was the most confusing became clear. So if you have a really, really complicated problem that you're solving, and I hear people complain all the time, oh, are you kidding? I can't make a one-sentence problem statement. My problem that I solve is very complicated. Try a story of your customer and really dig in on what's their pain point? What are they feeling? What are they saying before they would buy from you? And then what's the outcome that your solution gives them? That makes that customer journey clear, which will make it clear to investors. Right. Another area that can add so much impact is if you talk about your team from the perspective of your personal experience and motivation, your why. Has anybody here read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why? It's a fantastic book if you haven't read it yet. I'm loving it. But he really talks about that companies that are clear on their why have a much easier time recruiting talent and gaining loyal customers. So dig into your why. If you're running this business because of a personal experience and it makes you absolutely committed to solving this problem, then you should be really thinking about how can I portray that in a story? It doesn't have to be the long story. We don't want the long story. We want the short story. So don't say, well, when I was in college, I studied this, and then in my internship, I learned this, and then blah, blah, and it led me to figure this out. That's too long. That doesn't show commitment. So you can put this either at the beginning to explain the problem because you've lived it, or you can put it in the market to explain how serious this market is, or you can put it in the team section. So I'll give you an example of a client that I was just working with last week. And his story is so compelling that we put it right at the front. That when in his personal experience, he was caring for his sick wife who, because of her illness, had insomnia. And during COVID, he was the caregiver. So he suffered from sleep deprivation. His short-term memory was really small. He lacked focus. He was exhausted. And this is what motivated him to create a sleep device to help people naturally fall asleep and to go back to sleep and have a better sleep. But as he's telling this story of sleep deprivation, like you really feel empathetic for this. Like, oh, that's horrible. Sleep deprivation is painful. And it went on for months. And then at the end, so this this portrays he really understands the problem. But even in the market, we put in a story about the people that suffer from sleep deprivation, like nurses who are working shifts. They can't take powerful sleep medications because they need to be alert. They need their rest. They're getting burned out. And because of burnout and staff shortages, more of them are leaving, which creates more staff shortages. So you see this story of nurses portrays the trends in the market and how urgent it is to find ways to help. So this is where you can use that story. You can weave it into the beginning and in the middle and at the end when you talk about your vision, right? That your vision is that people who are suffering from sleep deprivation get better restorative sleep. We have healthier outcomes, happier people, happier relationships, right? So that story can be woven into the whole pitch, and still cover the things investors want, right? We're still covering problem, solution, market, product, numbers, traction, all of that. But to end with the vision, then it brings it all together. Okay, next one, traction. Use a story to make numbers feel real. Give us a story that those numbers can talk, right? What do those numbers mean? Sometimes it's, okay, here's the number of customers or the number of, maybe it's your revenue or your recurring revenue. But dig into what's the story behind that. Perhaps it's, we've helped X number of customers and here's some product testimonials. Or we have a monthly recurring revenue of this. What's the story? That might not be an impressive number until you hear the story. So I worked with a client a few weeks ago whose monthly recurring revenue is not all that high, but it has a lot behind it. So we turned it into a story that all of the pilots have converted to paid, and they are all on this recurring revenue now. And each of them is growing the size of their plan each month as the company expands their features. They have zero churn. And the feedback from their customers is that they are growing revenue and saving time using this product. So it's a great story, but if you only show this is the monthly recurring revenue, it's not impressive. So think about what your numbers mean. And then the other one that's a really big one for stories to use at the end is your vision. Particularly if you're solving a really hard problem that that people will want to get behind. So, for example, a couple of years ago, I invested in a company and their vision that they portrayed of cleaner oceans with no more lost fishing gear and reducing danger to sea life while helping fishermen save time and reduce costs was really compelling because they painted this picture of first the problem of sea life getting tangled in fishing gear, and then the second one of how that can be reduced dramatically. So if you have a great vision, put it into a story so that we can picture it, because we can picture stories in our head and remember them later. So much easier than just, here's our plan, here's our ask. So my goal for you is that you can be memorable with your stories so that you can make it easy for investors to understand what you do, to understand why you're doing this, and to make it really clear to investors why they should be interested, and enough that it motivates them to want to learn more. That's where you're going to get that second meeting. So you can use stories to make those sections of your pitch crystal clear and more memorable. Now, before we open it up, I'm going to ask John for some ideas. I know he has ideas on how to use stories to portray numbers. So I'm going to put you on the spot in a second. But I really want to, I'm going to send this chat to everyone. I've been gathering more stories and more ideas. So I write a newsletter weekly. And my last one was on storytelling, and my next one's going to be on storytelling. So if you want to hear more about storytelling or pitching in general or future events, please subscribe to my email newsletter. I don't send more than one a week, and I don't even do them weekly. I only do them when I have an idea that I want to make crystal clear. And also follow me on LinkedIn. I'll put that here. And then I want to ask John, because I talked about how to make those numbers clear in a story. And I'd like to ask John for some ideas on where you've seen those numbers in traction, where a story has made them clear.
Well, so I think I find that a difficult question directly to answer, but let's talk about some of the components of that. As an investor, I am looking for the team to have certain things, specifically that they're de-risking their business. As they de-risk their business, one of the ways that we do that is that we have discipline about mapping our activities to our projections. And typically we do that in our financial projections. And so, hold on a sec. When I have financial projections that are random MBA numbers that I pulled and stuffed into a spreadsheet that are ungrounded, then telling that story of the ungrounded hockey curve often disconnects me from the experience of the beginning of the story. And so, as an investor, I like to see what I consider a bottom-up approach to numbers. And I think it's really important that the founders have clarity on the business numbers, which is to say that they're running a lot of experiments that connect what they're actually seeing in their efforts to the projections they see in their cash flow projection. And so they tell me in the beginning the story of, customer number 1 or customer number 8 and the engagement with that customer and how that created some lift in the customer process, right? It makes that program go a little bit faster. And so what is it that we're looking for as investors? So I would say that angel investors in the context of the Seattle area, and then presumably in the Startup Investor Accelerator context as well, are looking for companies that are near to and approaching product market fit. And we're looking for things that indicate product market fit. And one of the components of that is exponentiality on the company's engagement. And so, what does it look like when I, as a founder, know that what I'm seeking is exponentiality? And so, I'm telling the story of engagement that gets bigger and bigger over time. And so, when you tell me that I talked to this guy and then I waited a bunch and I talked to that guy and it feels very disconnected, then I feel like you're very early and you don't have flow and exponentiality with your traction. When you tell me that each week you get more and more people coming in and that is growing, now I hear a story of traction and growth in traction. And if you are telling me a story of measuring that traction and giving me metrics, now all of a sudden that this is going to be a big scalable thing becomes much more concrete for me. Hopefully that got us halfway there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, particularly, sharing that story of the customer experience, customer number, or this is what we've learned through our customer discovery. That can be a great story to show that you're approaching product market fit, and that you're listening to your feedback from customers.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I wanted to leave a lot of, okay, one other thing about storytelling, everyone, is that it's really important to practice. Storytelling is a skill, kind of like learning an instrument or learning to play tennis or golf or something if you play sports. And if you and I wanted to go play in a tennis tournament next month and we took a lesson on Saturday, we wouldn't go, okay, we learned a lot, we got it. I'll see you in 3 weeks and we'll go to this tournament. No, we would then practice several times before we go play, especially because I'm not very good at tennis. So we would need to get some coaching and then go practice and practice and practice to get it down.
Or
And
maybe
story
practice thousands of times, not
practice thousands
three
of
times.
times.
Yeah,
So storytelling is like that. You need to practice it, you need to record it, you need to watch it. You need to really get feedback and make sure you're learning and increase your skills. And if you need to get some coaching, get some coaching. If so it's not just a go to a webinar and then I've got it. It takes some iteration and some practicing and then some making some changes and practicing some more. So keep that in mind. I use Udly to practice. I use it all the time. I mean, I give talks all the time and I still practice. So I'm going to send you this link to Udly. Oh, can I find it?
I've got it.
You've got it? Which I think I have it in the bottom of my notes. I didn't have it ready. So use Udly. And when you try Udly, if you decide, you know what, I'm going to buy the annual plan, use this. I think that this is my code. I recommend it to people so often that they gave me a discount code. So use that code to get 20% off. Because it's great. So at least use something like that. You know, you can use Udemy to start with, or you can record it on your phone, but it's so important to keep practicing and to keep making them more and more concise. So you could tell a long story, or you can then practice it until you get it short. And one way to do that is when people say, all right, I've got this, so much I want to convey. I ask, what is it you want people to remember? If a week later they said, tell me about that pitch or tell me about that founder, they're not going to just regurgitate everything that you said, right? They're only going to remember 2 or 3 things that were meaningful to them. What do you want those things to be? And if you can just make those really clear, then that's your story. That's the bit that you need to focus on. Don't try to cram in your whole business model and your whole plan in 5 minutes. You can only fit in maybe 6 sections of a pitch and 2 of them in a really good story, and they're clear and memorable. So be very selective on what you say so that you can be concise.
And you didn't use these words, but I want to reiterate it this way. The goal of the pitch is not to create complete understanding, but to be compelling enough to get to the next step. And all of these investments take many steps because they're the process of building trust and understanding over time. So be compelling, not complete. One of the things that I notice is that people are very heavy on the product, and they do the 80% on product and the 20% on everything else. And in fact, at the early stages, early pre-seed stages, it's far more important to be customer centric and to be telling the story about marketing and customers and traction and engagement than it is to even have the product built. So you don't even have to start building a product before you're engaging with investors about the business if you are working on the solving of problems for a critical audience that is sort of pounding on the door saying, if you build this, here's my money, let's go, right? So
Yep.
a lot of times product centric engagement actually diminishes your chance of funding.
Exactly. That's why in those lists of things that investors really, really want to see in a short pitch, product was not listed. It's
Right.
much better to convey very clearly your problem and solution than it is how your product works. So if you only have a limited amount of time, focus on product and solution and market opportunity and how your team is committed, then that's a much better story. And then they'll go, tell me about what you're doing. And then you can have an hour-long coffee meeting and talk about your product. Well, probably not. They'll ask you about your customers and then they'll ask you about your product.
Yes, maybe so. Do you want to
Yes.
open it up to questions with everyone?
Yeah, let's do that. Yep.
So
I
let
made sure
me
we had time for
take
questions.
take off the spotlights and then we can see everybody. Does anybody have any questions they want to?
Yeah, there were some
Uh,
questions in the chat, which I tried to avoid because I couldn't read and talk at the same time. So you'll have to
yeah,
put
no,
your hand up and
I
re-ask
think
them.
we addressed most of those questions in one way or another in the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Do you do you think it's good for a founder to have a subject matter expert as a investor or someone who's outside of the area?
Dana, I'll let you start. I certainly have lots of opinions.
Yeah, well, that totally depends. Um, that if somebody's a subject matter expert and you need that expertise, then it might be a good thing, but you want to find investors that are a fit for you, whether they're an expert in your industry, an expert in your product development, or they're just great at helping you with your marketing, or they're great at introductions. But you need to be clear on the kind of investors that you want, and having one that's a good on the subject matter is not a bad thing, but you have to trust each other and develop a relationship before you make that decision.
From the pre-seed to the seed to the Series A, which is the world that I live in, I think that any investor that you have, if that investor is not creating value besides the money, then they are the wrong investor for you. And it may not be that they're subject experts. They might be business experts. They might have a huge network. They might have insights into particular problems that you know you're going to have that are not product related, or they might be product related. But you have to have some clarity on what the value that they're bringing to the table is. It may be that they just happen to have a good network of fundraising people for the next round, and they're basically warming up your next round for you. That would be worth a lot in terms of your investor capacity, right? And so the real question is, who's on your extended team, and how does that build the path to an exponential business?
I see that we have a few investors in the room. Brent, are you available to chat? Are you in a place that you can come? Because I'd love to hear if you have some good examples of some where a good story really helped a pitch become more clear.
Yes, it's very valuable. I really like the information that you're sharing here. We have had several presentations that I've seen where the presentation was pretty much everything. The product, was secondary to what they were trying to get accomplished on as far as the information. And we've had other pitches where they've gone into so much detail on the product that you just didn't have any connection to them. And you just, it's kind of like, okay, that's a nice product, but I don't have confidence that you're going to take it anywhere. So
because the most important thing is that they're showing momentum and amplification, not that the product is cute.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. That's good insight. Yeah, if investors get lost in the product details and features, then you've probably lost our attention because we haven't seen where your vision's going or where the potential for the business is. Because investors don't invest in products, they invest in businesses and teams. So you need to really emphasize how this is a business, not a cool product. So can everybody turn their videos on? Because it would be really fun to get a screenshot of our call. I know we won't fit everybody on one page, but if we get enough that we could get a nice screenshot of everybody smiling. What do you think? Well, a few more. Okay, we're getting, oh, thank you. Now we see smiles. That's so much nicer. So much better. I'm just going to take a picture. It's easier. Okay, we need a few more people with without their videos. Come on, a few more, few
If
more. One
if you
more
do
row.
the right click, you can turn off the people who are not turning on their videos. But
Okay,
in
well,
any case,
if we get another row of people with videos, then we will,
it'll look cooler.
it'll
Yes,
look a
I
lot
agree.
better. Can a few more people show their videos? One more row. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Oh, a few are coming on. We'll just take a quick screenshot and then we can carry on with questions. Okay, two more. Come on, let's get two
So
more. So we have
while we're
another.
working on this, how many people are actively thinking about raising money in the next 6 months?
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
three or four. Yeah.
Oh, no,
Um,
another bunch raised
There's
their
another
hands.
another
Yeah.
5 in there. Yeah. So the Seattle Angel Conference 25 is on May 8th. If you drop me a note, I'll send you a discount. Um, and our goal is to help people understand how to do pre-seed funding to be the angel investor that does that funding. And we do that by learn by doing cohort, where people actually invest in a company as a side effect of the program. And so we're now up, I think we're up at 40 some 43, 44 investments at this point. And so we can talk about how that process helps grow things. So around you, 15% of the household are by law and allowed to do angel investing. And so you have that have enough wealth to be angel investing that are unaware that they could be. And so I would encourage you to have that conversation with them.
Okay, so a few more people with their videos on, and then I want you to wave for the selfie, and then we can ask a few more questions. Okay, everybody, thank you. Smiling. I appreciate that.
Well, I see Jonathan's hand is up.
Okay,
Jonathan,
I
you got
think
a
he
question?
raised it when you said who's
Are you
raising money
fundraising?
soon.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Jonathan, did you also have a question? Or you just raised your hand because you're going to be fundraising soon?
You're on mute. There we go.
Okay, all right. So raise your hand or unmute yourself if you
Alex
have a
raised her
question.
hand a moment ago. Where'd Alex go?
Oh,
Nope.
Alex, do you
Alex,
have a
you're on
question?
mute.
No, I think it was raised automatically. I'm not sure because I was
Oh, because you
looking
did this
around.
and you have your setting that
Yeah.
causes it to raise money. Yeah, that is
Oh, sorry, yes. Sometimes, yes, if you do
these
that and
automations thing.
your settings go, then you look like you have a question. All right, does anybody else have a question?
Chris, it looked like you raised your hand earlier. Oh, I see Ryan's got his hand up. Ryan, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hi there. How you doing?
Hi there.
I was just wondering, do you think that in your pitch deck, a story about something relevant for your product is appropriate to put in there if you're talking about um, sort of the general problem that you're trying to solve, if that story talks about it? I have the GameStop saga in my pitch deck because that's what my product aims to solve, is what happened there for funds. So I didn't know if that would be appropriate to put in, or do I want to
But
avoid
you know, roughly sticking, oh, I need a story, so I'm going to sort of pull my slides apart and stuff a story in, even if it's relevant, creates all sorts of resonance problems. And so you'd really like to have a story that is able to be woven through things so that you keep, set the frame and then you keep coming back to that frame over and over as you go through, as you explain the pieces of the business proposition, right?
I see.
And it's not, cutting out a picture about this story and then cutting out a picture about that other story, and they're unrelated and they're all jangled. You're
Mhm.
trying to move me emotionally by getting me to anchor my feelings and my attention on something and then carrying me to the resolution of that feeling. Like,
Uh,
oh my God, of course I have to invest because that's an important thing that needs to happen, right?
right.
You're trying to get me to do this leaning in thing. And you
Mhm.
can't do that by telling me, blah, 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 we're part of this big thing, blah, blah, blah. If we only get 1%, blah, blah, blah. And we have all these cool technical details. And oh, by the way, we have all of these little hairy bits that you should pay attention to. So I skipped the next 25 slides because I'm worried about the hairy bits you just told me about, right? How do
Yeah.
you give me a very narrow story that makes me lean in and goes, oh, that has to happen?
Mhm. Gotcha. Okay.
So
That
one
would
way to
be
do that,
compelling.
yeah, instead of looking at your pitch deck and saying, where can I make a story, is
Mhm.
just put your computer away and
Mhm.
use post-it notes. This is my favorite way of planning
Mhm.
a pitch, a webinar, even a course, is I plan it out using creating a storyboard using post-it notes, where then I can write things out and then rearrange them or whiteboard it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if you get it out, sort of, you go horizontally and you can whiteboard or post-it note across a wall until you can think, now, how does this work together?
Mhm.
If I talk about this story around the problem solution, does it then make sense to weave it back into around the market opportunity or on the vision? How does
Mhm.
that work? And
Right.
get away from PowerPoint when you're planning that, because PowerPoint's not conducive to brainstorming. It's conducive to design. And it's
Yeah.
hard to, I know when I'm in PowerPoint, I'm trying to fix the background color or find an image or change the font and make it bigger. And
Yeah.
like, then what was I going to say? I can't remember. So do some brainstorming with paper or post-it notes or whiteboard.
Okay.
Really, to really plan, how does this make sense as a cohesive message? And try, I challenge you all to do it the first time without any product features at
Okay.
all. Just make it about your business. And then if you need to add a few, product benefits, and here's the feature that makes it happen just because you can't leave it out, then put that in at the end if there's time. But really, it's about your business and your vision and making it clear that you've done customer discovery, you've got this huge market, you know where you're going. It can actually weave together nicely if you
Mhm.
step back and do some storyboarding.
Okay.
So a lot of times people think of their pitch as a thing that is a permanent thing.
Yeah.
And a pitch is not a permanent thing. A pitch is a piece of decoration to your conversation that changes every single time you do a pitch.
Mhm.
It might have a lot of things in common between each step, but you adjust the conversation to the audience each time.
Mhm.
And so if you have a high tech centric group of people, you might want to lean in on the tech. If you have a non-tech group of people, you might want to lean back. If you have a bunch of angel investors whose average education about healthcare system is sixth grade, then you speak at sixth grade level, not at PhD level around the stuff. Even if you know what the PhD name is for that disease, you can't use it because I don't know what it is in the audience. In the
Yeah.
same way, the thing that I, as an early pre-seed person, care about is fundamentally different than the fundamental core of the Series A investors, right?
Mhm.
I think Christopher says explain it like I'm five, but there's a set of videos that I saw which basically explains concepts at like 5 different levels. Here's the early elementary, here's the middle school, here's the high school, here's the college, here's the professional, and it tells the same story over and over again. That's what you have to do for every pitch, is to figure out who's my audience, or more importantly, who in the room is the audience I want to reach, and then tell the story to that person in the context that makes sense. And then if I'm telling the pitch again, because a lot of times we're pitching more than once, then I'm moving the conversation over time as I, gather people's engagement and then move them step by step down the sales funnel. And if you're not thinking of the pitch as a sales process, then you've missed the whole point, right? This is not an academic exercise for me to understand anything. This is a sales effort for me to believe in you enough to spend my money on.
Right, right. That
Yes.
was beautifully said. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Stephanie's hand popped up there for a moment.
No, I just, if I could piggyback on that, because I'm in like rampant pitch season and every week my pitch deck is changing. And Ryan, I pitched at a Stealth Summit on UW campus and it was a mixed bag of people. I mean, we had Jen from Ascend on one corner, and then we had a bunch of college students that are super smart and in many respects more brilliant than me. And a lot of them had really good stories. So what I thought kind of intuitively, when I had a mixed bag of audience members like that, was the more, well, it's an educational environment. So I wanted to pull my story on how we surveyed UW and SU students and make it about educational understanding. And I think I interlaced 2 or 3 stories, but the emphasis was getting back to certain keywords, educational, bringing people and communities together, better understanding, because when we survey students, they don't know beyond Trump or Biden who's running for president, making it timely to the history of the world events and stuff. So it's always interesting, but I think the other bit, if I may say, is just finding these events to put yourself in front of and getting comfortable with the uncomfortability, because I get a mini panic attack and anxiety every time, but I learn something every time from the feedback I get. So
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a really good point, Stephanie. It is so important to practice in front of people, which is why, and also like using something like Udly or your phone to practice, so you get more comfortable in what you're going to say and how you can say it, so that when you're up there, you've at least, and that I'll just set the expectation that you will be nervous. So don't think you're ever going to get so confident that you don't get nervous. I mean, I give talks all the time. I always get nervous. It's just because that's adrenaline. That shows you care. That's a good thing. It gives you energy. So expect to be nervous and set yourself up for success with having practiced and being well prepared, so that even if you're nervous, you do a great job.
I would also say invite some friends in the room. It helps me to know that there's like people that know me. And so you feel less vulnerable. Anyways, that's my hot tip.
No, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Brent, do you have a comment?
I was just going to kind of echo on what's being said here. Is, you know, the presentations do need to be dynamic and adjusted, maybe even each time you give it. But the other thing is that the person giving the presentation, the founders and the company need to embrace feedback that is given to them. You know, it's like, you know, last night, some of the presentations that we saw, you know, I was talking to the presenter afterwards, giving them feedback and so forth. It's not like I don't like them, or I don't like the company, or I didn't like the presentation. It's just, you know, I'm trying to help them. And the worst thing you want to be as a founder is to get a reputation among the investors as you're not coachable.
That is so true. And that is one of the things that comes up in investor meetings, is that whoever was meeting with that person before the pitch will say, hey, they took my feedback, they're very coachable. And that's a good thing. If somebody says, you know, I tried, I gave them feedback and it still looks exactly like it did when they applied, I'm sorry, then that's a red flag. Investors want to know that somebody's open to learning continuously, because nobody knows everything. And Gary's going to share some wisdom. Hi, Gary. Welcome.
Hi. Brent's comment is really a good one about they're not coachable, as we all know. But that's a, you know, I was during this your presentation, I was thinking, I wonder how many presentations I've seen, and I guess between 3,500 and 4,000. And that coachable point that Brent brought up is really a good one.
Yep, it is. It's so important. Which is where, you know, the whole idea of giving the pitch is not to have a great deck and to get it across. It's really to build a relationship. So if you go in with this mindset of I'm building relationship, the deck is just my, my tool, my visual aid. And if they say, nah, don't show your deck, that's fine. You're so well prepared that you could have this a conversation, which is whether they're asking questions or you start your pitch and then they chime in with questions. So be prepared for anything. It's not about your deck. Your pitch is not about your deck. Your pitch is about building relationships to investors. So sometimes you have to just step back from the deck and prepare for a pitch, do the storyboard or make notes and prepare for conversations and try to meet with investors one-on-one over coffee or over Zoom and have these conversations so that you can understand what it is that they're after and do the deck later when you have a good idea. I like to think of it as that the deck is sort of like a resume. If you're looking for a job and you apply, you're going to send your resume ahead, and the best outcome you can hope from that is that somebody will invite you to an interview. So when you get to an interview, it's not about your resume. The interview is your chance to shine. You have this conversation, you connect with the person, you show how talented you are and personable, and you'll be a team player and you're coachable and all of these things. You're not going to rely on your resume to do that. You're going to do that in the interview. So treat your pitch like your first interview and it's your time to shine and stop focusing on the deck. That's one mistake I see. People are so focused on the deck, they're reading their deck and then they go, and on this slide, you can see blah, blah, blah. We don't care what it says. We want to know about your business. Talk to us. So
I
step
would
back
like
a bit.
I'd like to bring up an exercise for Chris. In the process of thinking about what's the structure of this thing, there is a thing called Ignite, which is basically death by PowerPoint as entertainment. It's 20 pitches, 20 slides per pitch, 15 seconds per slide, auto advance.
Oh, that sounds awful.
And it's wonderful because it forces you to be on point with the timing and the rhythm of what you're doing. So let me challenge you to do this. Take your pitch deck, whatever it is, the Alliance of Angels pitch deck, the Kretsu pitch deck, whatever combination of somewhere between 10 and 20 slides. Think out very clearly the point that you're trying to make on each slide, and you have 15 seconds, which is basically 2 sentences. And so what are the 2 sentences that are the point on this slide that I'm supposed to have? And all of the pictures are just pictures with no words. I'm going to take 10 pictures, or I'm going to take 20 pictures, and I'm going to have a point, and I'm going to say that point on each slide, and I'm going to just practice that somewhere between 3 and 5 minute pitch, right? Does that make sense, what I just said?
I would start with Post-it notes before you open PowerPoint.
No, I didn't say anything about PowerPoint.
Well, you said slide. So
I
I'd
just said
say
pictures.
section instead of doing it with slides, do it with by section. And what am I going to say about my problem in 2 sentences? Next part, what am I going to, so if you can describe every section of your pitch on a Post-it note, you're getting concise.
Yep.
And that's not small writing. That's the kind that you can put on the wall and look at it and go, okay, this is making sense.
And what that will force you to do is then build the sound bites that then you can thread into a compelling story. And so if you start with the smaller version, like the 13 slide instead of the 20 slides, those main points are the points that you want, that you then need to weave together into a narrative that is a frame narrative. And that will then make the practicing so much easier after you get to the point where you can actually do one of those and not stumble over the auto advance.
Any other questions or comments?
Did you say the name again of the auto advance thing?
It's called Seattle Ignite. I put it in the chat.
Gotcha. Thank you.
sounds like we're done with questions at this
I think
point.
we are. I think we are. That
So-
worked out great.
Thank you so much, Dana. I always appreciate this. I am currently in the middle of planning our summer workshops. We will do at least 2, maybe 3 pitch deconstruction workshops. We'll put them on the Seattle Angel and the Startup Investor Accelerator meetups, where we will have people do 1-minute pitches. We'll sort of do a group deconstruction of that, and then we'll select 3 to do a 3-minute pitch, and then individually tear apart the things and talk about it. It's a very useful way to notice the distance between what you said and what you think the investor heard and what the investors actually heard in the room, because what you said and what they heard are often not aligned. And so those are things to look out for. We have a workshop on Thursday, which is around women angel investing. It's a panel. So please take a look at that. I put that into the chat as well. Please go down to the bottom of the chat and you should see a little ... And if you click on that ... you can save the chat. And there's a bunch of links that were put in the chat that might be useful for you. Again, we will take this and put it up on the YouTube channel. So thanks for coming. Hope to see you again soon. And please do follow the newsletter for Dana and enjoy the thoughts she has about how to communicate effectively through pitching. Thanks so very much.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to see you here. Thanks for participating.
Thank you. That was really
Thanks,
nice.
Christine. Nice to see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, nice to see